I'm Amy Morgan, the feature writer for the Marriage Initiative, and I am delighted to introduce you to Doug Fields today. Doug's a marriage minister with the heart of a youth pastor. He's impacted thousands of marriages and youth for the past 40 years at Saddleback and Mariners churches in California and holds a Master's of Divinity degree from Fuller Theological Seminary. Among the more than 50 books he's written, Married People, How Your Church Can Build Marriages That Last, 7 Ways to Be Her Hero, the one your wife has been waiting for, and Getting Ready for Marriage, a practical roadmap for your journey together. Doug also creates content with beloved leader Jim Burns at Homeward. Marriage champions will find hundreds of game ideas to enliven their events at downloadyouthministry.com. That site is full of downloadable tools Doug has co-created, games, all sorts of resources that you marriage champions can use to enliven your events. Doug, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely, Amy. Totally honored to be a part of this to help anybody that's working with marriages. So thanks.
Yeah, well, I know our marriage champions will be excited to hear what you have to say. Tell us your story and what and who inspired you.
Oh, well, honestly, my story started as a teenager being invited to a youth group. And the buddy who invited me said there is a pizza, cute girls, and a comedian. And that kind of hit all the check boxes there. And it was that night the comedian was talking, and I love to laugh, and it was typically just being the class clown with my buddies anyway at that point. And then he talked about laughter fades, but joy lasts forever. And then he introduced the gospel, and I went home that night and knelt by the side of my waterbed. It was the 70s; everybody had a waterbed.
Yes.
And I said, "Okay, God, if that is true, then I want in on that." And that began my journey. And actually, Jim Burns was my youth pastor at the time. And
so wonderful.
I know we've been friends for 55 years. Well, not 55, 45. My math is bad. Math is impossible.
I agree.
How about decades?
Yes.
And then, so really my pedigree goes back to youth ministry. It's where been a youth pastor for 35 years, written a bunch of books, trained a bunch of youth leaders. Yeah. But about a decade ago, my heart started shifting to that if I really wanted to help kids, I needed to help their parents. Yeah. And if I really wanted to help their parents, I needed to help marriages. Yeah. And so Kathy and I had been married for at least enough time where I felt like I had some credibility, because anybody knows that if a marriage is bad, every part of their life is bad, including their parenting, and the kids are the result of that. So really, I do marriage ministry because I have a youth ministry heart, and I want teenagers to grow up with parents who love each other.
Oh, well,
so that's my story. Went into youth ministry and is kind of evolved into. I still do both. I help run a youth ministry company called Download Youth Ministry that provides resources for youth workers all over the world. And I do marriage ministry at my church, Mariners Church in Southern California.
Awesome. Well, and one of the things that you do I want to talk about what you do at Mariners, because you were at Saddleback and you kind of built the marriage ministry there, and then now are transferring it for the past 10 years to Mariners, but you do an event and you're the primary speaker. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, once a month. It's pretty wild. Once a month, we do an event called Marriage Matters, Saturday night at our church. And it started with, kind of a small room of people, and grew out of that space and then into the worship center. And then it couldn't hold it in the worship center anymore. And so partly because of our service times on the weekend. And then, we meet in a community center, and we have every month over 1,000 people, 1,000 to 1,500 people that come, that invite their friends. It's kind of an easy entry level because once they trust you as a communicator, they're like, okay. One of the secrets we learned is not to switch speakers every month, even though, people probably have much better content than I do. There was a trust level with me that they would say, okay, if you're going to be here next week, we can invite our friends. And so that's what we've been doing that for 3 or 4 years now. And we take the summers off. So I'm actually working on new material for this next month, starting back again.
Well, I think one of the things that you do about that, you do with that, it was so brilliant. You have your Saturday evening church service, like so many do, and it slides right after that service. So
Yep.
people are already there, and you provide a meal. Let's talk a little bit more about the logistics, because I think that these are some ideas our marriage champions could really learn from.
Yeah, so our pastor calls it stacking. So we stack things after our events. We have two Saturday night services, 4 and 5:30, and then 3 on Sunday. And so then we stack Marriage Matters on top of the 5:30 service. So at about 7 o'clock, we meet in our community center. We provide childcare. We align our junior high and high school ministry, so there are things for those kids happening at the same time. We provide a meal, make it cheap. It's $20 per couple. So actually our church underwrites this. It's part of our ministry to our community, because that doesn't cover the cost of it. And then it's, in essence, we kind of run it as a youth ministry event with a marriage message. So there's, music and laughter and games. I mean, I don't mean music like singing. We don't have like a worship set or anything like that, but fun music, eating at a table, some silly questions, some games, some competition, some giveaways, some prizes, a funny video. And then I do about a 30 to 40-minute message. And then my wife comes up at the end and, tries to correct everything that I said wrong. And we banter a little bit. Then we give people time at their table to talk. And, we're in and out of there in about an hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah, while their kids are all doing things as well. It's so brilliant. And you brought up something about your wife, because you said, it's not her natural bent. So many of our marriage champions, a lot of people do minister as a couple, but that's not exactly your Kathy's sweet spot. So you have found a way to incorporate what she is really good at doing. And I just love that. Talk a little bit more about how you do that, because you really, I think this really touches the heart of some of our marriage champions, where maybe one or the other might feel more comfortable in front of a microphone. Yeah,
well, I've been teaching and speaking in large churches since I was, 18 years old. So it's a natural, it's not, I've developed a craft and a skill with it, but she, we were finding it was a deposit or a withdrawal in our marriage, not a deposit. Yeah. So she would do it, but it wasn't a good week before for us when she would do it, because she was prepping and she didn't want to prep. She didn't even want to do it. She was just doing it because she liked the end result and wanted people to have a different point of view than just the male. And so once we decided that this isn't good for you to feel like you have to prep, why don't you just, she would always read my talk and give me feedback during the preparation phase of it. And then we just sit during the week before and we come up with questions that I'll ask her at the end, and then she's spontaneously, and she's fabulous and cute and fun and has a great sense of humor and makes fun of me, and she's self-deprecating as well. And so it just shows another balanced side to the male voice, and she doesn't have to prep. So it's kind of a win-win-win.
I love it. Well, and you say too that you're kind of irrelevant or irreverent, not irrelevant, irreverent sometimes, that you're kind of fun, and you're very fun, and you just keep it light and you don't talk down to the guys. You make it something that a guy can feel comfortable.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up, Amy. I think that's just one of the things that I've learned over the years, is that most guys are not waking up going like, I can't wait to go to a marriage event. Where they'll tell me all that I'm doing wrong and beat me up and make me look like an idiot. And so, I just always promise guys, I say, I have your back. I'm not going to, every once in a while I'll make some comment, but I'll include myself in that comment of being a dummy. But I kind of have a little bit, male humor, because I feel like if you can reach the guy, that if he wants to come to a marriage event, the wife a lot of times is like, okay, I can, I don't watch ESPN. So I don't really get that reference, but my husband likes coming. So
yeah.
And obviously that is a stereotype that is not true 100% of the time. I know many marriages where the wife watches ESPN and the guy doesn't, but the majority I tend to speak towards guys.
Yeah, no, I love that. And before we start talking about some of your many, many other resources, I do want to bring up the part about the games because I know, like for me, I'm not good about at thinking up a game. And if I had to plan an event and had to come up with a game, that's the part that would really panic me. Like your wife, the prep, that would really make me grumpy. But
Yeah.
you have the download youth ministry. You have all sorts of games and icebreakers and ideas. I just think for our marriage champions, that's just a huge resource. Talk about that, please. Even though it's meant for. I mean, it was originally designed for youth ministry, but it is so applicable for our marriage champions.
Yeah, well, I mean, here's the reality is that, kids like to have fun. And so youth workers, they have to create an environment where, obviously you want to teach them God's word and you want them to grow closer to Jesus. But, they do it in an environment where they feel like they're having some fun and some laughter. And these people like me that are running this. And then you turn the corner and you go into the lesson or whatever. But so we just had the idea with Download Youth Ministry that for most, there's thousands and thousands of youth pastors around the world who are creating great material. And then that material dies on their hard drive because they created it for their youth group. And so our idea was like, let's get it from them. We source everything from our youth ministry friends around the world. We clean it up a little bit. We put it on our site. We charge very little, when we started, it was $3. I think the most expensive thing is like $5 now. And we give 50% back of that to the youth worker. So as a side hustle. So, but some amazing graphics, amazing fun, creative games that are relevant. I mean, the Olympics just happened. So there was a lot of Olympic type games and whatever is going on in culture, they create some type of fun game that you and I could never do. We could never make that happen. And if you're a marriage leader, you can go on our site. There's thousands to choose from. They all look very professional. You won't be embarrassed by them. And it costs you $5. So it just takes the stress out of a lot of programming.
I just think that is such a wonderful resource that, I mean, if there was nothing else we talked about in this whole wonderful interview and all your wonderful, 50 other things that you do, that is one thing that I think our marriage champions are going to go, aha.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm writing this down right now. So, but you do.
It definitely crosses over to an adult. I mean, adults like to laugh too. And, depending on what the topic is, you could search what there's just all kinds of fun games that, I mean, I watch Our Marriage Matters reaches people in their early 20s to 70s and 80s and everybody in between. And, I've learned that's one of the common languages is laughter. Yeah. And people get into it.
Oh, well, and that is something too that you drew on about in your book, 7 Ways to Be Her Hero, which you wrote again, kind of for the guys. You said it's kind of an ESPN meets men's magazine with a sneaky peek for the wife at the end. Let's talk about a little bit about that, because I can see a lot of people really looking forward to that.
Yeah. 7 Ways to Be Your Heroes. I was just doing a bunch of men's stuff and was talking to guys about marriage. And one of the things I have the heart to believe that most men, married men, they want to do the right thing. They just don't oftentimes know what it is. And so guys are give me a list. What do I need to do? Oh, it's 7. Great. Okay. I'm in for 7. And so that was just kind of the essence of it. Just man to man, here's what you can do to be the hero that your wife is waiting for. I wrote a little tiny mini chapter at the end of each chapter that I call for the sneaky wife that is wanting to read what her husband is reading or know what her husband is reading. That gives them something to dialogue and talk about if they're both into it. But it's not written for women. It's written for men to be better husbands.
Yeah, I like that. I can see that finding its way into a lot of people's stockings and maybe our marriage champions even recommending it. So you also wrote something for churches about developing a marriage ministry, married people, building marriages that last. Let's talk about that, because I think our marriage champions, that's where a lot of them are. They are that voice for marriage at their church, and you really encourage them and help them kind of set up some things.
Yeah, a dear friend of mine named Ted Lowe, who used to be an intern for me decades ago when I was youth pastor at Saddleback Church. And we just developed this heart and friendship. And then he moved out to Atlanta and started marriage ministry. And we've just been dialoguing marriage ministry. And We just decided like, here, how do we help people? In some ways, I wrote a book called Purpose Driven Youth Ministry, which is that one right there, hanging somewhere. There it is on my wall, right there. And it was really kind of a strategy and a structure for youth pastors. And Ted said, I want to do that for marriages. Can you help me with that? And so we just talked about how would we do it in the church and how we were doing it and used examples. And it's just kind of a little bit of a blueprint for leaders to follow to build a marriage ministry in the church.
Can you give us some of your tips in there? Can you let us peek behind the curtain a little bit?
Gosh, Amy, I should have prepped for that. It's been a long time since I've looked at that. I mean, some of it is stuff that we've talked about, simple things like, focus on the male. I know that sounds super weird, and if you take that out of context, people could be really disappointed on that. But the idea is like most men we talk to don't want to go to events, especially marriage events. And marriage events oftentimes are put on by women, and they're made, really frilly and flowery type settings, and guys just don't feel comfortable. So it's even like have a little bit of a shift, not to say it should all be, gas pumps and WWE wrestlers, but at least, do some programming with the man in mind. We talked about certain entry levels that, it shouldn't just be a one message a year by the senior pastor on marriage. Like, how do you get the pastor to open that up and expand it a little bit? Yeah. We talk about small groups, marriage small groups, shorter, bite-sized, experimental. I'm actually, right before the call, I'm working on a 4-week marriage curriculum that's coming out soon. That's just 4 weeks, and it's just entry level. Hey, the way that I would announce it is, hey, I know you want a better marriage. Everybody wants a better marriage. Would you commit to 4 weeks? Okay? Yeah. Not 12 weeks, not a year. This isn't a, commit to life Bible study. It's just 4 weeks. How many of you think you can do that? People like, oh, I can do 4 weeks. Yeah. So we talk a lot about creating a culture that you're not trying to always talk people into doing stuff, but making things a little bit easier to step through the front door. And that's some of the stuff that we talk about.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned your series that's coming out in, you said January 25, I think. So yeah. Just around the corner, but talking about that and the title, what was it? Two Becoming One?
It's called, the title is called A Better Us. Two people, I forget the subtitle. Two people developing a one heart marriage.
Yeah.
So the concept of one heart marriage, obviously, is Genesis 2 shall become one. But what does it look like when two become one? And it is if in my marriage that when a lot of times what we do is we think I can be passive aggressive towards my spouse, or I can hurt her heart, or I can make these mean comments to wound her. But if you're really a one heart marriage, then you're doing double damage. You're wounding her heart, which is your heart, because you're a one heart. And so it's just a little bit of a framework shift to begin to think about, not my heart and protecting my heart, but protecting our heart. So we talk about that in terms of communication and conflict and just attitude adjustments. And, I think it's a game changer when you treat your spouse like people do everything they can to protect their heart from being hurt. But if it moved from my heart to our heart, it's just a mental construct that shifts, but it helps me think like, oh, when I hurt Kathy, I'm actually hurting me as well. And nobody, self-harm is not something that most of us, enjoy.
Right. I love it. And you said and the videos are just, you're doing a video series with it too. They're just like 10 minutes, super short.
Short, like video series to start a small group, and then small group questions. But then also there's a 5-day, read a short little thing, and then some questions that you and your husband would talk about for, 10 minutes about the topic. So pretty bite size. It's not like you're not reading a 300-page marriage book together. It's just get some discussion going.
I love it. And you said too, I love when we talked about it, you said the cover, the graphics, everything, it's not so feminine that a guy would not even want to hold it in his hand.
Yeah, yeah.
It's much more appealing to both the husband and a wife.
Yeah, it just, it's again, it falls under that idea of, most guys are not seen with holy marriage books.
No, probably not. Oh, well, let's talk about you are the content architect for the Getting Ready for Marriage, which is a book. There's a whole website, the gettingreadyformarriage.com, and you wrote a book with our beloved Jim Burns. Gosh, I think it's been a decade ago, but it's a roadmap for the journey together. But let's talk about that. I mean, premarital work is something that a lot of our marriage champions do, and it's also so important to get those young engaged couples off on the right foot.
Yeah. Well, Jim and I do a lot of stuff in Southern California on pre-marriage, and then your first few years of marriage, and then Marriage Matters, and we have a Refreshing Your Marriage retreat that we do. So Jim and I are talking marriages a lot, and we found ourselves using stuff that was written. I've been married 40 years, and we've just been using that same stuff for a long time. And there's great stuff out there. We didn't break any new ground. I don't think. We just put it in maybe more current language, but we put a book and a workbook together. In some ways, we wrote it to our kids. Our kids are all married now, and we were in that stage of life when we wrote it. But in some ways, a lot of my youth pastor friends, if they're in youth ministry for a season of time, 10 years or more, they wind up doing a lot of marriages, performing marriages of kids that used to be in their youth ministry, and they were looking for resource. And so, we aligned with David C. Cook, and we put out a book called Getting Ready for Marriage, a workbook, Getting Ready for Marriage. And then we wrote a follow-up book to that called Your First Few Years of Marriage. Kind of what are some of the things you face in your first few years of marriage?
Yeah, well, and that's really important too, because getting to the altar is one thing that is
Right.
We definitely encourage our marriage champions, and that is a place where a lot of people they're ready to do the work to if they want to get married. But then those first few years too, I mean, that's a lot of times too, people marrying later, that may be then where they start their family, and then they're that's a big change, and some things like that to overcome some obstacles. So yeah. And you have an ebook too, right? That's free, the 10 ways to improve your marriage before it starts.
Amy, you know more about my stuff than I do.
I have my cheat sheet up, I have to admit.
Yeah, I think that's on gettingreadyformarriage.com.
Yes.
It's just access of some 10 tips to get started. It's really kind of a top of the funnel freebie to draw people in to see if our Getting Ready for Marriage resource would be helpful for them.
Yes, I love that. Well, and you talk about too, you and Jim too, how your kids are married and having children and the grandchildren, and that really kind of leads you talking about your legacy that you had. You and Kathy, you can look back and see how all this time and effort is really paying off and has led that. How do you inspire other people? I mean, you've done it so well. How do you use that to inspire others to that they want that same thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's inspiring for people is when you're real with them, and so Kathy and I, we have a great marriage. We don't have a perfect marriage. My friend Jim, who I mean, he always says him and his Kathy are a high maintenance marriage. Kathy and I are a little bit on the other extreme. We're both pretty easygoing. My wife is really chill. She's super, people say, what's the secret? I'm like, marry a Kathy Fields. Because she grew up in a solid family. She's got a strong identity. She's not easily bothered. She's secure in who she is. She knows who she is in Christ. So, obviously sometimes the healthier you are, the healthier your marriage is. But I think what inspires people is when I tell, stories about being a dummy in my marriage and saying things I shouldn't have said and doing things or being selfish, or I think that's what's inspiring to people, because people believe they have their blinders on to their own marriage, and they look at other people's marriages, and every marriage looks better from a distance, right? You compare what you know about your marriage to what you don't know about other people's marriages. And every time you compare, you lose. And so I think what inspires people is to be real and honest and let them know that there's hope for them no matter where they are. There is a better us. I tell people there's no such thing as a perfect marriage, but there is a better us waiting for you. And you take one sinner who marries another sinner, and you put them together, and then they have little sinnerlings, and that creates chaos, right? I mean, you can't have a perfect marriage with two imperfect people. So I think, Amy, what's inspiring is when you're honest with people and you let them know that you're on that same journey that they're on. But I also, those who are parents, I say the greatest gift you can give your children is a healthy marriage.
Yeah.
It really is the greatest gift. So when people say, "Oh, we don't do date nights because we don't want to be," we'll do that when we're empty nesters. Well, your marriage may not make it that far, but I'm telling you, when you do date while you have your kids in your house, you're setting a model that we've now seen. We've been around long enough to see that our kids value that, and they not only respect it, but they've actually come to reflect it in their own marriage. And that's been really exciting for Kathy and I, because there were times where, like, I know it's been a busy week. Should we leave the kids tonight? But it's date night. And there was one time when my son, I can't remember how old he was, but for whatever reason on that Thursday night, we didn't do our date night. We switched it. But when we didn't go out on that Thursday night, he asked us if we were getting a divorce.
Wow.
Because we said, Mom and Dad go out on date nights so we have a better marriage and a healthier marriage, and a healthier marriage makes us better parents. And you're going to be happier and healthier because when we're happy and and my kids grew up in that environment. We missed a date night and they thought we might get a divorce.
Wow, that is quite a testimony. That is, and you said now, like, they'll babysit for each other so that they can have their date nights, and sometimes they bring them all over to you.
They do. Yeah. They every once in a while we'll have all 7 at our house while our kids are doing their date night thing. And Kathy and I are great about that. As long as they pick them up.
As long as you can give them back. Yes.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. No grandkids for me quite yet, but we're looking forward to that one of these days.
It's a very fun stage.
When you talked about being authentic and kind of lowering the bar and helping people understand that no marriage is perfect, one of the things that you mentioned that just made me laugh, that, like a lot of things, but also I thought was really, you said, when you and Kathy are doing the banter at the Marriage Matters, you said, we're weird. Everyone's weird, and I think that everyone gets that. I mean, everyone's marriage has its own weirdness. And when you can embrace everyone being weird and not feeling like that's not okay. I mean, everyone can just be weird in their own way, and that's fine.
Yeah, exactly. And, and I'll tell stories. I mean, I could give examples right now because I have 2. Like, one of the things Kathy says is Doug always has cups. Everywhere he goes, he's got cups. Like, who does that? She opens up a shelf and cups fall out because, I like to drink. This is Chick-fil-A, which is where Christian chicken was made. And it's a styrofoam cup. You don't see these very often. I had a good experience at Chick-fil-A. I just take it home because I think I'm going to drink. I might as well do the drink out. And I save it. That's weird. Nobody does that. I'm highly educated. I'm semi-smart, but I collect cups because I'm weird. And the point is that if you want to get mad in marriage, you can be mad at things all the time. And so one of the keys in marriage is to accept each other's weirdness, to minimize that, not to maximize that. I mean, we all know that when we were dating, there was always that initial attraction of your differences are so fun, and if I could only be that spontaneous, or if I could only be that funny, or, the way she walks is just so cute. And then you get married and everything kind of flips upside down. And you're like, oh gosh, what? I used to think that was enjoyable. But that's one of the things of marriage is you married a weirdo and your spouse married a wackadoodle, and together you got to figure this out because 2 are now 1. Yes. And, so I kind of went off the rails on that. I'm not even sure the question you asked, but.
No, I love it because And I think it just gives our marriage champions too, just a peek and a preview of when they, in your resources, who you are and what they'll get when they look at your videos. Because you have such a great personality and a lot of energy, and it just brings a lot of fun to your resources. So I'm glad that you were able to express your personality and share that. But Doug, you have been such a burst of energy. It has been so much fun talking with you. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Amy. And thank you for, I'm glad you highlighted Download Youth Ministry, because when I talk about marriage, I never really talk about the youth ministry side of it, but it really will save marriage leaders a ton of time. They don't have to start from scratch. Yeah, and it's so cheap and inexpensive. We should have, because youth pastors are the lowest rung in the church totem pole. Like the maintenance and janitor people get paid more. So we keep things really cheap for youth pastors. So marriage people, we should probably have a marriage price on them and raise them an extra $1 or something like that. But it's super, super cheap. Use it. If it doesn't work for you, we'd be happy to refund you.
Oh,
I won't be happy, but I won't do it. My team will do it. But
yeah, no, I think that's wonderful. I was very, very struck by that. And in fact, my sister's husband's a pastor, and I shared that with him. And I was like, if you need a game, this is where you need to go. So anyway, Marriage Champions, if you'd like to find out more about Doug and his work, you can always find us at marriageinitiative.org and marriageresources.org.